Yo everyone, welcome to the first episode of Tibet and Tibetans. I'm your host TENZIN KALDEN and you're watching the RangJong channel. In this episode, we are diving deep into the Tibetan culture, my Tibetan culture, with some fun facts, quirky tips, and a bit of humor. Without further ado, grab your butter tea and let's get started. This is the real map of Tibet, and this one is the map that China wants you to accept. This is the real flag of Tibet, while this one is something that is enforced upon my fellow Tibetans. Tibet is ranked the least free country by the Freedom House, while the Chinese propaganda machine will show you Tibet as this.
Don't be fooled by this video. Even though it may seem like the Tibetans here are happy and welcoming his visit, the true Tibetan patriots who are well versed of the past atrocities, also the invasion, are made sure they don't participate in such events. Also, the media will try to show these people as Tibetans, but they are mostly Han Chinese and Chinese descendants living in Tibet. This is not a true depiction of Tibet. Here is an example of an orchestrated welcome in North Korea, who is also a dictator just like Xi Jinping. And this is how the real Tibetans welcome their leaders. And here you can see every one of them has a Tibetan scarf, folded hands, and are bowing down to show respect. See how everyone has a Tibetan scarf in their hands. You can see how each of them are lined on either side of the road just to have a glimpse of His Holiness. That's how we show respect. This is not the place for event, rather they are waiting in line on the road. And this is how Tibetans welcome their political leader or spiritual leader. You can clearly see none of them are clapping to welcome His Holiness. And do you see anyone waving at him? Now watch this again. You can see that all of them are either clapping or waving at him. And none of them has the Tibetan scarf, which is kata. None of them are offering the Tibetan scarf. Here again you can see the Tibetans are offering the Tibetan scarf called kata to His Holiness, who is our spiritual leader and who used to be our political leader as well. Now you can see none of them are waving at him, none of them are clapping, but all of them are having the Tibetan scarf to offer. This is how the Tibetans welcome their spiritual leader and their political leader. We don't carry pom-poms and clap when he arrives. Rather, we carry a Tibetan scarf called kata to offer and to show respect. Watch here. She offered a Tibetan scarf, not a clap.
While in reality, Tibetans have this to say.
Here you can see and hear Tibetans in Tibet, mainly the monks, demanding human rights and the safe return of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama back to Tibet, and also for Tibet's independence. They are speaking out about China's hypocrisy and their propaganda to eradicate the Tibetan culture and language.
대통령이나 너무 좋으니나 작전 예고 대치 주시고 있으세요. 대통령이나
이게 지도자 제일 기득권들은 못 들어. 오요 기득권들은
제가 잡이나
Here you can see these protesters are offering Tibetan scarf and thanking them for recording their message and hopefully spreading them. You can understand how the true patriotic Tibetans feel about the Chinese illegal occupation of Tibet and its treatment of the Tibetan population. As you can clearly see here, a Tibetan monk as well as a bunch of Tibetan locals practically begging the Chinese officials not to destroy the Tibetan monasteries and their locality. As you can see how the Chinese media try its best to change the narrative and prove its hypocrisy.
He is our spiritual leader, the 14th Dalai Lama, from whom the entire planet seeks blessings and teachings on compassion, and the only person for whom the entire religious leaders will come together to pray for his help. While this guy is the Chinese dictator for whom the entire planet seems to fear just because of cheap labor and sweatshops in China. Once you take that away, no country will fear them, let alone respect them. This is how the world sees Dalai Lama as. And these are all the books he has written, out of which this is my favorite. And all of these are the awards and medals that he has achieved in the span of 60 years. Now the entire world knows that His Holiness is a spiritual leader, he's compassionate, and his main message is mainly about compassion, right? But the Chinese narrative on His Holiness is mainly out of fear that the entire planet will unite because of him and fight against the Chinese.
In San Francisco, somebody, a friend, is asked me, why is the Chinese government so much afraid? Government. No, Chinese government is so much afraid to you. Then I responded, because my home. so anyway.
You don't have to take my word for it. You can just watch it yourself, how the entire population on this planet reacts to China.
I call myself as a Hong Konger instead of Chinese. That was just because I feel like Hong Kong is a very special place, and being a Hong Konger is something different. Saying that I'm a Chinese doesn't really represent my identity. Currently, Hong Kong is undergoing a movement.
Stop platforming murderers. This is a representative of a dictatorship with 1 million Muslims in concentration camps. 1 million Muslims in concentration camps. Uyghur Muslims are being raped and tortured as we speak. We're supporting freedom for Uyghurs, Tibetans, Hong Kongers.
Mr. Pavlou, it's time to go. You're not listening to me. Could you please leave the room? Mr. Pavlou, could you please leave the room? Mr. Pavlou, could you please leave the room?
This man should be a pariah. He's representing a dictatorship committing genocide. Australia should not be doing business with a government that has concentration camps.
But out of fear of losing their businesses, this is how their political leaders will act.
Ready, close. Ready, face.
Inside Parliament, the scene was more sedate and choreographed, beginning with an acknowledgement of the gulf between the two sides.
Australia will always be Australia and China will always be China.
And lastly, this is how the UNO was formed.
The Second World War caused enormous destruction and left large parts of the world in ruins. That's why the United Nations was established with one main target: to prevent war in the future. The UN is a meeting point where leaders from all around the world can interact. In the UN, countries try to agree on which rules and agreements should apply in the world. The most important topics of discussion in the UN are peace and security, human rights, and sustainable development. All the countries in the world. One of the main principles of the Sustainable Development Goals is to leave no one behind. The most vulnerable should be given priority. In the UN General Assembly, all countries, small and large, have one vote and the same say. All member states are committed to follow the Constitution of the United Nations, the UN Charter, where peace and human rights are central topics. The most powerful organ of the UN is the Security Council. It's in charge of maintaining peace and security between nations. The Council has 15 members, 5 of which are permanent, and the remaining 10 members are elected for 2-year terms. Even though the UN is the most important organization working for world peace today, it also receives criticism for its shortcomings in the face of modern-day conflicts. Many argue that the organization needs to change to remain important in the future. The UN General Secretary has called for major reforms of the organization. Several member states have supported change to maintain world peace in years to come. No matter how you look at it, the UN is one of the most important meeting points in the world, as well as an arena for international cooperation. Even though the UN is imperfect, it is the best we've got, and all nations must work together to take care of our world.
But in reality, this is how the United Nations have always favored the Chinese occupation of Tibet.
I just want to say one more thing about the UN agencies, because Dolkun also referred. We consider United Nations as one of the most undemocratic institutions in the world. And if I have to repeat one of the statement of my predecessor, then United Nations is like a human body without arms and legs. And today, you know that UN is majorly funded by China, and you have so many gongos. Gongos, if you have not heard, is government-organized, non-governmental organizations. So you representing China at the UN level, and we don't even have accreditation as an ECOSOC. We're working towards that, but we always have to piggyback on some other NGO to express ourselves. So this is the condition that we are in, but we are discussing with other countries to see whether there will be possibilities for some Tibetan organizations to get ECOSOC status. So UN is definitely an international body, but right now it is very much under Chinese influence.
But we all know karma is and once a superpower doesn't mean they will remain a superpower. And after bullying the entire planet, China will succumb to its own karma. And that's all for today. In the next episode, we will discuss a brief history of Tibet as per the Tibetans. Not that Chinese propaganda bullshit, okay? The real history of Tibet. Alright? Take it.